Good evening and welcome to The Right Side, the show where we talk about today's news, views, trends, and opinions from an admittedly conservative perspective. Tonight we're being joined by Pastor Gary Montara out of Faith Fellowship in San Leandro. We're going to be talking a little bit about the growth of his ministry and the expansion issues he's seen in other congregations around the area where religious rights can often be infringed upon by local city governments and others who may not have similar objectives for their own faith or their own lack thereof. But Pastor, thanks for joining us virtually this evening. Welcome aboard.
Thank you for having me, man. It's great to be on the show.
So tell us a little bit about your church, your background, and kind of the expansion you're seeing there.
Yeah, we're Faith Fellowship, a Foursquare church in San Leandro. I have been here actually for 25 years. Took it over in September of '93. It had about 40 adults and a few kids left in it, and God just had other plans, and we started to grow immediately, became one of the fastest growing churches in the Bay Area. And today we have about 2,000 people that go here, and we've sent out 10 couples to start up or take over churches all throughout the Bay Area. So it's been a pretty good run, and to God be the glory.
Right, and so obviously when things are expanding at that pace, you start to burst at the seams eventually.
Yeah, and we did. We were in a pretty small sanctuary that the previous pastor had built in '91, and then he left. We had 4 services in there. Then we expanded the sanctuary out another third bigger and still ran 4 services. And then we built this building that we're in now in 2003. Unfortunately, we opened on Easter Sunday morning. I say it unfortunately because that day in 2 services, 2,000 people showed up. And it backed up the freeway for 10 minutes, and we actually lost some people because of it. They didn't want to come back to that much traffic. So we went to 3 services, and we've been at 3 services, and we need a bigger facility, as many growing churches do. San Leandro is a wonderful city. That's why I've remained here for 25 years. But it's an old town. It's a lot of older families, and they weren't set up for a mega church. And so when our church exploded in size, we're on a one-way, not one way, but one lane each way street in a residential district. And the city was very gracious to allow us to build our building, but it immediately caused traffic problems. And so we've been searching for a building ever since, which is not that easy.
Right. And so talk to us a little bit about some of the things you've seen with other congregations as they've been growing and running into similar challenges. And you talked about the city being gracious at first and that, but then the ramifications of traffic and other things. You've talked about with me in the past other congregations who've run into bumps and bruises from community, from city councils that actually stopped them from trying to grow their congregation in a sane way. What have you seen?
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that they're trying to stop the congregation. What they're really trying to do is keep a hold of their tax-based buildings, and so they use that as the reason to not allow a religious assembly to utilize a building that would further grow that congregation. And so what happens is the powers that be get involved, and they say, no, we're not going to let you use that building. It's happened in many, many cities across the nation. In fact, when Clinton was president, he set a law, a federal law called the RLUIPA law, Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act, stopping cities and municipalities from utilizing a building unless the city needed it for the highest possible good or it created a health risk. And so cities were violating that law, and so Clinton signed it into law, and it helps churches and religious assemblies to get into bigger buildings. Now, of course, in Texas and Oklahoma, Kansas, land isn't so much of an issue, but right here in the heart of the Bay Area, it's an issue.
Right. So talk to us, for those of us who might not be aware of how a tax ramification would even become an issue within a church. Is it because of tax-free status? What is that?
Yeah, so if you get a retail entity in a building, obviously they have to pay the tax of their sales tax. We're a nonprofit church, and so we wouldn't have to pay the tax that other entities would. And so instead of looking at it as a per case basis, they just have this generalized mentality that we're not going to give up our tax base, which helps run the city, to a bunch of churches. And so they play hardball, and they have power, and they can stop that. But again, the law that was passed doesn't allow the city to just roughshod over religious assemblies. And so if the city, in fact, could prove that they need it for the highest possible reason, or it did require, or, can make a health risk having so many people in one location, then the city could stop them. But other than those two reasons, you cannot stop a church. The cities have gotten smart. They have now assembly use zones in their city, and you can only go after buildings within those zones. But even then, if they don't want you in a building, they can make it tough for you.
Talk to us about how that can occur. And actually, I have a question before that, and that is, are there other not-for-profit types of organizations that you've seen similar reaction to, or does it tend to focus predominantly on churches?
Well, it happens to churches, but not just Christian churches. I'm sure it has happened to mosques and temples and whatever. Whatever is going to, number one, if the city doesn't want you there for whatever reason, they're going to make it tough. Number two, if you're not going to have the same tax situation as you would with a retail or a for-profit business, then the city, they just play hardball. And I don't know if you've ever dealt with the city council, but I've heard stories that the city councils, they're pretty much God in that city.
And from the stories that you've heard from these other pastors, has it tended to rise up mostly from the community putting pressure on city councils, or does someone with an agenda just get in and decide that they're going to make it difficult, or does it vary?
It's both and. It's both and. If the church or entity is going to create parking and traffic problems, that's going to obviously be a concern to the neighborhood or the residents that live there. It could be someone on the city council or the mayor or the city manager, whatever, that just doesn't want you in there, and then you're going to have a challenge on your hand. But if they get the people behind them saying no, you're going to have a tough go-round. Doesn't mean you're not going to get the building, because again, you have the law behind you. It just means the road's going to be tough, and they know how to play tough.
And if it's a not-for-profit organization, especially if it has limited resources, then all they have to do is wait you out, basically.
That happens quite a lot. The cities usually have deep pockets, and the smaller entities don't.
And talk to us about what those assembly zones look like. Are they predominantly residential neighborhoods? Are they potentially more often commercial, or does it depend on the city?
Yeah, I can't speak for all the other cities. I know a couple of church pastor friends who have gone through these battles. Again, San Leandro in particular, it's a residential kind of place, and so they never had to deal with a mega church. The mega churches that were there were only maybe a large Catholic church, and that was it. That was probably built in the 50s or 60s, and so. They just didn't set up the city, and they didn't want to give up their commercial or industrial base. Each city's different. I had a friend of mine in a nearby city who had to go to court, and right. That's a tough thing.
Yeah, I'm just curious, from a pastor's defense perspective, for example, if it was in a commercial zone, for example, that the building had been acquired and traffic issues were cited, if there could be defenses about the predominant time frame that the church would be in use would be in non-business hours anyway, so could they fight on that level? These are the kinds of things if there were ways to equip pastors with the right verbiage to maybe get their way through, it'd be kind of an interesting...
Well, the worst part about it, Chris, is that, you're in for a fight if you go down that road. If the city plays tough on you, you're in for a fight. and it can turn into a long fight. It can turn into a lawsuit, and you know, it's tough. It's a tough go around. You know, thank God for people like Pacific Justice Institute down in Los Angeles, who defend religious Christian organizations and help them in these kind of cases where they don't know the laws and what their rights are. And they've won many, many cases. But it's a tough go around.
Yeah, and we've actually had them on the show, and we're excited about the work they're doing, because also, since they do their work pro bono in a lot of cases, it means that there's no outflow for the pastors or the others trying to get involved in the fights, and they have some adult supervision with them to keep them out of trouble.
Who did you have, Brad Dacus?
Yes, he's actually been on the show a couple times, I think.
Brad's a sharp guy. I love that guy.
Yes. So what part does the congregation play in these types of things? Have you heard success coming from the community in defense of these churches as they're trying to grow when approaching city council for testimony, et cetera?
You know, I've heard stories, real life true stories, where the city council actually went to the pastors and said privately to them, what are you doing to make your church grow? Why are people coming to your church? As though it's like an anomaly, right?
Right.
And the fact of the matter is if the Spirit of God is there, if the Word of God is being taught, if the people are loving, and you treat your kids right, why wouldn't a church grow? They should grow. But if you look at the average church in a city, the older churches, I mean, look how small they were built.
Right.
You know, they weren't built for the mega mentality. And this has happened over the last 25 or 30 years, where we've seen these mega churches and guys with great skills and God's calling on their lives, and they thought outside the box. Well, now it's something you have to deal with. So, you know, I've seen and heard of police chiefs saying that's a great place for a church to be. It's in a commercial area. There's nobody there on the weekends. The fire chief said that's a great place for the church to be. But it still comes down to what the city council is going to say and do. And then you're either in their corner and they're in your corner, or you're in a fight.
Okay. Well, so on the growing in the faith side, are those the attributes that you're seeing that are manifesting in the other pastors that they're growing their churches and starting to understand property rights laws as well? It's the moves of the Spirit, it's the talent, it's the word being proclaimed.
Are you asking me, is that why the churches are growing?
Yeah. Is that where, are you seeing a common denominator within all of the other churches that you're mentioning of that being similar?
Well, the solid Christian churches with solid pastors, that's why they're growing. But, you know, let's be honest, the Mormon church is growing, and so is Islam. So, you know, and you can draw a crowd. If you have people skills, you can draw a crowd. But in the kingdom, it is done by the Spirit of God and the calling and living out the Christian principles of taking care of God's people. And so, thank God there's a whole bunch of them. You know the Bible as well as I'm sure, Chris, that every time there was a Nebuchadnezzar that rose up, God rose up a Daniel. Yeah. And every time there was a Goliath, God rose up a David. God was always going to be with someone who had his name in their mouths for him.
Right. Are there any support networks, or are there any collaborations other than unofficial ones where you've seen faith leaders be able to go to just collaborate, get resources, share best practices on these kinds of issues?
You know, I would say that if there's anybody out there who's wanting to find a bigger building and they're having a hard time doing that, you should probably talk to Brad Dacus. One of the things I think is important is to try to keep good relations with the city mayor, the city manager, the city council. You know, having people skills and keeping good blood between you when the time comes is important. But even then, doesn't guarantee you're going to get that building. Right. And so the more information you can get, the better. You do have the law in your hands, but you're also could be in a fight.
And so tell us again the name of the law and where people can find information on that.
It's called RLUIPA, RLUIPA, Religious Land Use Institutionalized Persons Act, that Bill Clinton signed into law, stopping cities and municipalities from stopping religious assemblies from utilizing a building unless the city needs it for the highest possible reason or it's a health risk.
And so do you know of, was it caused by a certain case that he did that, or were there just so many happening that he decided he had to get involved? Usually, I mean, especially someone like Clinton, there's got to be a motivator for him. Do you know any backstory on that?
You know, I don't. I think I researched it at one time, but I forget the details. But it was happening enough that, I don't know, they saw to it and fixed it.
Okay, excellent. What else can you share with us about what's going on at Faith Fellowship?
Well, we're coming to the end of this year. The theme for this year, 2018, was greater. We wanted to do everything greater with excellence for the Lord in our personal lives, in our families, and in our church, in our community. We just wanted to step it up a notch. We believe that that's the word God put in our spirit. And we had a pretty awesome year. We're looking forward to the new year. Chris, you've been here. You know, I teach the Bible line upon line.
Right.
They tell me I'm pretty good, I guess. We have an incredible music department. We have a wonderful Sunday school, probably the best youth pastor around. And it's a pretty happening church, very diverse, you know, white, black, Hispanic, Asian, people from the islands, millionaires sitting next to people on welfare. And it's a piece of heaven, really.
Yeah, and I know that even some of our own crew, as we were talking about before the show, knows, and you've got an event coming up for singles looking for godly companionship as well, it sounds like.
Well, we're having a singles gala this Saturday night, December 15th.
And we can't let you talk about money or anything like that because this is a not-for-profit. But there is there is an event going on Friday, and Saturday. Saturday, and it's at what time?
The doors open at 5.
Okay.
It's a full catered dinner.
Okay.
We have a musician coming, a saxophone player, a professional, to play music, and then we're having a comedian. Dennis Gaxiola is going to be here, incredibly funny guy. I'm going to share some words to the singles myself, and we're going to give away prizes. It's kind of a dress-up affair for the singles during the Christmas holy days.
Okay, excellent. And what other kinds of community outreach are you guys doing? Where might people find you out in the community, or how might the community be welcomed into your doors?
Yeah, I mean, we have 30-something ministries going on here. You name it, we probably do it. We have outreach. We had a lady in our church start a sex trafficking, going after those who were doing the sex trafficking, and it's gone nationwide now. And man, we have Bible studies, home groups, men's ministries, women's ministries. We go around the community trying to help neighbors and everything the church is supposed to be doing.
Talk to us. We've had people on the show, and it's been a little while, about sex trafficking issues. How is that trending in the Bay Area? Is it getting better? Is it getting worse?
Well, I'll tell you this. They know they're in a fight now. Before it was, they were on a one-way street with no one trying to stop them. But a number of organizations have risen up now, and one of them that actually began right here in our church. And their voice is being heard against the sex traffickers, both, the people that are purchasing the kids for sex and the ones that are selling them. So they know they have a fight on their hands now in the kingdom.
And so are you seeing the majority of that trafficking happening with children, or is there also a lot happening in the adult scenarios as well?
Both, but the alarming thing is that they're taking 11, 12, 13-year-old girls and boys and exploiting them. And, they wouldn't have a market if there wasn't somebody to buy them. So, I mean, just think about the sin nature that we have as human beings. These people are buying 11 and 12-year-old kids, and somebody's selling them because there's a market for it. Right.
No, for me, I want to drive the point home that a lot of times the growth that's happening within these churches, it goes beyond just what people think about as Sunday services. You're looking at actually doing things to change the community and change the environment for a city. And so that's why it just always boggles my mind that there would be anything trying to stop that kind of community activism.
Yeah, I think you're right. They just think of the church in this negative, pejorative way, and it's unfortunate because we don't just hit on one issue. We hit on all the issues that we feel are against the Word of God and His morality. And when we stand up for biblical marriage, when we stand up for pro-life, and then all of a sudden we're fighting sex trafficking, they still look down on us because they don't agree with these other two issues that we fight about.
Right. So just, pastor's perspective, how are you gauging your local community as far as being more or less receptive to the Word of God it seems, from my perspective, like we're getting increasingly secular as a society. Are you seeing anything different? Or are you just fighting so hard that there's no time to look up?
Well, it's kind of like a car business. As long as there's cars, a mechanic will always have a job. As long as there's sin, I'm always going to have a job because Jesus came for the lost. And so sin is going to continue to be sin. And every generation, there's a new batch of sinners that come up. And so Paul, unfortunately, in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1 said, "But mark this, in the last days there'll be terrible times. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love." And it goes on and on. So, Paul said it's going to get worse.
Right.
But the gospel is the power of God unto salvation to everyone who believes. So our job is to keep preaching it.
Well, and so the other thing that always just jumps out to me is that unfortunately there's been a lot of Christianity done badly, and so a lot of times Christians get blamed for being hateful. And at the same time, when they're trying to change the community in this way, like you're talking about breaking people out of addiction, breaking them out of sex trafficking and all of these kinds of things, and knowing that, like you said, Jesus came for the lost, right? It's interesting to see that there's still that pushback, but we know for biblical reasons why there is, that the people miss those acts of love that really can change the community. So I applaud.
Let me tell you about this one, Chris.
Sure.
We got two guys in our church. One was an ex-drug addict. Uh-huh. The other one literally for a time lived underneath the bridge, on the streets, homeless. They got saved. Both of them began to build their lives. They go to our church now. They had a vision to get guys off the streets and cleaned up. So it's called Off the Street Ministries. They got an investor to buy an apartment complex on a cul-de-sac. One of the two guys is a contractor, so he went in there and gutted it all out, turned it into housing for men. In 2 years, he's got over 60 men that stay there every day, every night, clean, sober, teaching them a trade, teaching them the Word of God, and bringing them to church. I mean, they're out there getting it done. These guys were down and out and heading in the wrong path of life. The drugs and alcohol destroyed them. They've blown up their marriages, their families, and these two guys are getting it done, and we support them.
Excellent. Well, what's the website where people can go to find out more about your ministries, and then we're going to have to run?
Okay. faith-fellowship.us. faith-fellowship.us.
All right. Well, thank you, Pastor Gary, for being on the show and sharing a little bit about what's going on. We have to run for now, but we'll be back after a word from our underwriters, the Liberty Forum.
Bless you.
Some people think that a meeting of conservatives in Silicon Valley could fit in a small room. In fact, when the Conservative Forum was founded in 2003, we did meet in a small room, a coffee shop in San Jose. It doesn't get more grassroots than this. It may surprise you that there are thousands of people right here in Silicon Valley who share your principles of liberty, free markets, and limited government. Since our humble beginnings in that coffee shop, we've outgrown 3 meeting halls. From San Jose to Gilroy to Mill Valley, we bring hundreds of people together each month from all over the Bay Area to promote the principles of American liberty. How do we do it? It starts with a stellar lineup of speakers. Speakers like Steve Forbes, Senator Jim DeMint, Dr. Victor Davis Hanson, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, Andrew Breitbart, Pamela Geller, and many others. These speakers passionately articulate our shared principles and remind us why conservatism isn't just the smart choice, it's also the moral choice. Our monthly meetings are only one dimension of the forum. We underwrite The Right Side, a monthly television show on cable access channel KMVT. We also host a monthly Constitution discussion group and provide tables at our meetings for more than a dozen local groups who share our love of liberty to promote their specific cause. The Conservative Forum is the premier place in Silicon Valley for conservatives to gather, become invigorated, motivated, and empowered. We welcome guests to our monthly meetings and offer special discounted pricing to first-time visitors. Take a look at our speaker lineup in the coming months and join us to learn why we say liberty is made in America.
And that was a word from our underwriters, the Liberty Forum, formerly known as the Conservative Forum of the Silicon Valley. We've appreciated their sponsorship of this show for the last 7 seasons that we've been doing it. And but what they're best known for is their speaker series, and that happens at the IFES Portuguese Hall at 432 Stearland Road, just down the road here in Mountain View. Tonight they'll actually be having Andrew Clavin speaking. He's been a guest on our show previously, and he's going to be talking about what happened during the midterm elections. In January, Pete Peterson, Dean of the Pepperdine University School of Public Policy, will be on stage. And in February, Dennis Prager, nationally syndicated radio talk show host, will be there as well. The doors typically open at 6:15 and the show starts at 7. You can find out more by Googling Liberty Forum, and you'll get more information there. Just in closing, I just want to reiterate there are so many things that are going on that go beyond just the traditional faith of churches that are growing in the Bay Area and around the country. But in many cases, there can be roadblocks that can stop that growth and stop the things that they're doing to actually make the community a better place. And in many cases, it boils down to either tax dollars or people's just opposition to what they think is going on there. So I encourage you to research a little bit more and find out whether or not there may be signs of unfairness that are manifesting that could be stopping the churches from doing things that maybe government wants to do now, or stopping them from just helping to improve the standard of living for the citizens around them. We appreciate you joining us this evening on The Right Side. Again, I'm your host, Chris Pareja, and if you just have questions or you want to reach out, throw flaming darts at us, you can do that by reaching out to us at therightsidetv@gmail.com, or maybe we'll run into each other someday soon out there in the wild. Have a great night.